Tales of True Crimes and Strange Weapons, Volume 9. And why are we looking at some quills? Are they the weapons in question? Well, you'll find out in a minute, but first, let me just say that if you end up liking this video, you should check out my book, Committed with the Uncommon. The only true crime book that shares incidents executed solely with strange or obsolete weapons. And the book was only made because of support from people like Joseph Miller, and this video is a thank you to him. So back to quills. This is what a quill point looks like. Could you use that to injure or maybe even kill someone? Well, it wouldn't be easy. And a tangent, I can't help myself and think the only movie scene I'm aware of where that happens is in this version of Batman. But anyway, no, the weapon we're going to focus on in this video is not the quill, but it is related to it. Because, just like the chapter in my book that this video is an extension of, we are going to focus on pen knives. But no, that doesn't mean something like this, which is a thing. They existed in times gone by, were carried by spies sometimes, and you can still buy them on Amazon today. But let's jump back in time even further than those Cold War spies with their penknives and look at this painting here by Rembrandt, entitled Portrait of a Man Trimming His Quill. Because long before pencils and then pens replaced the quill, you had to use something to trim your quill. And to do that, you did not need a large knife. Does this guy look like he's holding a dagger, a large kitchen knife, a hunting knife? No, right? We can barely even see it. Remember this drawing from earlier? Well, here's the part I didn't show you. How to trim the end so that it would hold ink when you dip it into the little inkwell. So there was a market for a tiny utility knife, basically, and bladesmiths met that need. And so the pen knife was born centuries ago. And eventually, because of this, really small, I say really small, but small folding pocket knives became common. And these were handy little items to have on you. They didn't take up much space at all, but you could use them to cut string, whittle a piece of wood if you're bored because the internet hasn't been invented yet, etc. And then what happened is that these knives long outlived their original purpose because, like we said, they were convenient for all kinds of things. And that's why you can read about crimes committed even well into the 20th century with a quote-unquote penknife, like here. What's weird though is how often these things show up on police blotters, court records, and things like that, because these are terrible weapons. For one thing, the blade tends to be small, probably averaging like 2-3 inches. The handle that it folds into is correspondingly small, so it's not great for like an actual combat grip. There's no guard, obviously, not even a miniature one like some modern folders have to keep your hand from slipping onto the blade. And oh yeah, speaking of the blade and the potential for self-harm, the blades were traditionally non-locking. And lastly, these things were not designed to withstand the shocks of fighting, right? This was for slowly slicing things. So pretty much you could go down a checklist and point by point, this has all the features that you would not want in a fighting or defense knife. But despite all that, they are still knives and they are still sharp. So guess how people have used them when their tempers have flared over the years? Well, really, centuries. Something I cover in more depth in the book, but I'll just touch on briefly here, is the strange tradition, I think it's strange, of portraying penknives as murder weapons in song. Because again, really just about any other knife would be better suited to that purpose. This song and highlighted lyric here are from Bob Dylan, but he was calling back to a much older tradition. These lyrics here are from the murder ballad Henry Lee. And what I find is even stranger is that the weapon is often portrayed in these old songs. And when I say old, I mean Henry Lee is a variant of the ballad Young Hunting, which has practically medieval roots. And anyway, this tiny little weapon, not designed as a weapon, was often portrayed as a crime of passion murder weapon. Here's an image associated with Young Hunting. And then the strangest part is that I found life imitating art, seemingly, and have a bunch of modern crimes of passion using a penknife in my book. But speaking of true crime, let's get to it. This first story is from 1930s Los Angeles, so that's what you're seeing a picture of here. This one is really only an accusation, but I'm going to include it and you'll see why. It's a really short newspaper story, so let's go ahead and read it from the Los Angeles Evening Citizen News. Upon complaint of Ted Weimer, 37-year-old pharmacist, 2 young women were in the city jail today charged with assault with a deadly weapon. The girls are Olga Rutkowski, 21, a dancer, and Mary Monrock, 20. According to Weimer, he met the pair in an East 5th Street cafe, and when Miss Rutkowski assertedly asked him for money and he refused to meet her request, she allegedly stuck him in the back with a penknife. He was treated at the Georgia Street Hospital for a superficial cut. The girls denied the accusations. Now, what happens a lot with old newspaper stories, especially if it's a real minor incident, is you might not see any follow-up on this anywhere, meaning not just in newspapers, but in court records as well. So for something like this, maybe they just ended up walking away. Maybe Weimer just let the matter drop. But I find this story credible enough because he filed a complaint, the girls were arrested, and he was treated at the hospital. Meanwhile, I think there's definitely more to the story between him and these young ladies, and probably something on the seedier side. Let's jump to Ottawa, Canada, 1950. And here's a picture from that time and place. A penknife could get used in a street fight despite all the negative factors that we cataloged earlier regarding it as a combat knife. And that's what happened here in a 2-on-1 confrontation. And it was the man who was outnumbered who used the penknife, but he had a different knife on him. Luckily for him, he didn't pull that one out. We got a lot of detail here. The other one was a 5-inch spring knife, so some kind of automatic. And you'll hear in a minute why I say he's lucky that he went with the smaller knife. The defendant got into this kind of situation at all, or let himself get into it, is surprising given that he was enjoying a fresh taste of freedom. He had just gotten out of prison the previous December. This incident occurred just 2 months later. And because of this encounter, he would be headed back there, this time for a 4-year sentence. Back to his previous conviction real quick, it was for 17 charges of breaking and entering. And he, named Jean-Jacques Prevost, by the way, was only 19 years old when this street fight happened, so his life was not on a good trajectory early on. Let's read some words from the judge, Judge Marion. It is indeed fortunate that the knife with the longer blade was not used. You would be facing a charge that could not be tried without the intervention of a jury. You did nothing to assist your 2 victims. You did nothing but think of escape. You were concerned with disposing of the knife from which was still dripping the blood of your 2 victims. So he was not convinced by the defense team's claims of self-defense. What really hurt was that he cut both of his antagonists, but it seems that one of them did not make a move on him, whereas the first one admitted to grabbing him and to taking a swing, and then more or less copped to threatening him as well. Let's hear from this guy. Regarding his punch, he says, "I missed and slipped. Then he stabbed me under the arm." And under cross-examination, he admitted that he quote-unquote might have said, "I'm going to send you to the hospital." Given that it was a 2-on-1, I kind of think as a juror I would have sided with the defendant here when it comes to self-defense. The other man may have not physically attacked, but obviously there was an argument going on, 2-on-1, it got physical. That physical contact was initiated by the 2 men, meaning by that side. And it's not like the other guy tried to pull his friend back or anything once that was initiated. I think both guys were kind of leaning in, intimidating, I'm guessing here. Then once Prevost cut his attacker, he instinctively went at the other man, which, by the way, is not a bad idea. I mean, in terms of self-defense and making sure you survive the encounter, not legally. The Daily Telegraph from London, England gives us a short story that I'll read in its entirety. A boy aged 7 rolled up his sleeve at Loughborough Juvenile Court yesterday to show scars resembling swastikas on his right forearm. He said they were carved there by a boy of 11 with a penknife. The elder boy was put on probation for 2 years for assault causing actual bodily harm. Now, let's move on to our last story, and I've been saving this one. It is of the deadly lover's spat variety that we talked about earlier, enshrined in old murder ballads, except this one is all too real. And as I mentioned, just one of many. Let's jump back in time to the 1930s again, this time 1937. A location is Appleton, Wisconsin. This is one of those where I'm just going to read straight from the old newspaper. Headline, blames slaying on an impulse. Young Wisconsin man said to have confessed penknife murder of girl. August 10th. Glenn Barker, 24, of Schlockton, faced arraignment today on first-degree murder charges in connection with the fatal dance hall stabbing of Helen Wellhouse, 18. District Attorney Raymond P. Dorr said Barker confessed he stabbed the girl Sunday night on the impulse of the moment. Barker surrendered last night when he was accosted by Patrolman Clarence Hopp. "I think I am the guy you are looking for," Barker said. Dorr said Barker told him he did not have a date with Helen, but that he went to the dance to return her picture. An argument followed. The district attorney stated Barker and the girl later sat together and he put one arm around her, then reached into his pocket, pulled out a penknife, and stabbed her in the back of the neck. Well, like I said, life imitating art, meaning the old songs, or, as I say in my book, is it a case of life imitating art, imitating life? Meaning, were there incidents a long, long time ago where this weapon was used violently and the incident or incidents became famous? Yes, probably. Then they were enshrined in songs, and then later people are using this same object in the same way. And we will conclude this video. Thanks once again, very, very much so, to Joseph Miller for helping me make my book. And we have one more video to go because I'm doing one video for every chapter of the book. It just worked out that way coincidentally too, because I had 10 backers that were owed videos in thanks. I do think though that I'll extend this series, make this a permanent playlist on my channel and keep adding to it over time, just not in such a concentrated manner. Anyway, thanks for watching.